Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about, well, kind of a dark topic, but a really important one.
Yeah.
We're looking at the Astroworld Festival tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've sent over a ton of stuff, articles and research. And obviously this is, not a very lighthearted topic.
Right.
But I think what we're really going for here is sort of the under the surface takeaways. What are the things that maybe didn't hit the mainstream news right away?
Yeah, I think we're going to explore some of the dark secrets.
Yeah.
Not so much about Travis Scott himself,
Right,
but about the things that this tragedy kind of revealed, about the music industry in general,
Yeah.
about concert safety and artist responsibility and all of that.
And, I think for me, what's so interesting about this, and I'm really curious to kind of get your take on this,
Yeah.
is we all remember, the shock and the grief, 10 people lost their lives, hundreds more were injured in that crowd surge. And obviously Travis Scott took a lot of heat, lawsuits, all of that. But it's like, where does his responsibility actually end?
Right.
And where does the responsibility of, say, the organizers, the security team, even the crowd itself,
Right.
where does all that come
Well,
out?
that's the question, right? It's so easy to kind of point the finger and be like,
Yeah.
you messed up, you're responsible. But in reality, there's this concept called duty of care, which is kind of a legal framework for thinking about responsibility. And basically it says that organizers, whoever is putting on the event, has a legal obligation to create an environment where people can reasonably expect to be safe.
Okay.
So, if there aren't enough exits,
Yeah.
if the security is inadequately trained, if the crowd density is just way too high, those are all things that are going to fall under the responsibility of the organizers.
Yeah, but then things get a little blurry when you're talking about a genre, like we're talking about hip hop here,
Right.
where the expectation is that the artist is going to be pushing boundaries, hyping the crowd up.
Right. That's like part of the appeal
Yeah.
of a lot of these, high energy shows.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you reconcile that duty of care, the obligation to be safe,
Right.
with this expectation that the performer is going to be driving this kind of almost frenzy?
Almost like this chicken or egg thing. Like you get expecting that energy, but then that energy is also what can lead to these things getting out of control.
Exactly. You go to a Travis Scott concert, expecting to rage.
Right.
And that can be part of the problem.
And so I guess the question there then is, how do we sort of reconcile that? I mean, obviously Astroworld happened, there was a tragedy. What came out of that? Was there any kind of change to the way that these things are done?
Oh, for sure. Astroworld was such a wake-up call for the music industry. Okay.
I mean, it really forced everybody to kind of step back and look in the mirror and be like, okay, what are we doing? How are we managing crowds?
Right.
And what's interesting is you're seeing changes on both sides of that equation.
Okay.
So on the one hand, you're having venues, festivals adopting all this new technology, right?
Oh, wow.
Like AI-powered systems that can actually track crowd density in real time and alert security to potential problems before they even escalate.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. There are even systems now that can detect the mood of the crowd.
Really?
Based on social media posts.
Wow.
Which is kind of wild.
That is wild.
But the other side of it is okay, we have all this technology,
right,
but how do we actually change the culture?
Yeah.
How do we get people to actually prioritize safety?
Yeah.
And so there's a much bigger emphasis now on things like communicating safety protocols to attendees.
Making sure everybody knows where the exits are, what to do in an emergency, and then also training staff to recognize the early warning signs of a crowd surge, how to respond, when things start to get a little bit hairy.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work being done on the prevention side.
Yeah.
But what about the accountability side? Because it's one thing to prevent something from happening, but what if something does go wrong?
Right.
Has there been any change to, who's actually held responsible?
I mean, that's still, I think, a little bit of a gray area, legally speaking.
Okay.
There have been some, high-profile lawsuits, obviously the ones against Travis Scott, the organizers of Astroworld.
Right.
But these cases, they're so complex and there's so much finger-pointing, it's hard to say, this is exactly how it's going to play out.
Right.
But I think one thing that Astroworld did make really clear is that artists can no longer just plead ignorance and say, oh, I didn't know. You know, it's you have a responsibility to understand the potential risks of your performance style and to work actively with organizers and security teams to mitigate those risks.
Well, and what strikes me is, we've talked about the organizers, we've talked about security, you've talked about the artists themselves.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, you're right, it is kind of a shared responsibility.
It is.
Because like you were saying, you could have the best security in the world.
Right.
But if the artist is on stage, encouraging people to rush the stage to do all these crazy things.
Exactly.
It's still going to be a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. I mean, think about it, right? You're in a crowd of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Maybe even tens of thousands.
Yep.
And you're all packed in.
Yeah.
The music's loud. The energy's high. Things can get out of control really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess then, where does this leave us? I mean, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the big takeaway is that concert safety is not a one-time fix.
Okay.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
It's something that we need to keep talking about.
Okay.
Keep pushing for better technology, better training,
Right.
clearer communication,
Yeah.
and really a culture of accountability at every level.
So for everyone listening out there, I guess, what would you say is something they can do?
Yeah.
What can they personally do to make sure that they are creating a safe and also enjoyable experience?
I think, first and foremost, be aware.
Okay.
Familiarize yourself with the venue, with the safety procedures.
Okay.
Have a plan in case something happens.
Right.
And really just be mindful of your own actions and how they're impacting the people around you.
You're not just a passive audience member. You're part of this whole thing.
Exactly. You're an active participant in creating the energy of the show, but also in making sure that everybody stays safe.
Awesome. Well, hey, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive for today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See ya.